Hey, let's learn the endocrine system. What I do is I cannot read all this information, so I just go straight to the quiz and then I read why I'm getting each question wrong. And for me, that's a lot better because if I start reading the material from the book, I go to sleep. So let's start the quiz. Question number 1, which structure controls the activity of the endocrine system? Hypothalamus, thyroid gland, parathyroid gland, or pituitary gland. Let's see. Hypothalamus, let's check. That is correct. The hypothalamus is a structure in the brain that lies inferior to the thalamus. It is connected to the pituitary gland by a stalk. It acts as the control center for the endocrine system. Hypothalamus produces hormones that regulate the activities of the anterior pituitary gland. These include growth hormone releasing. So the way I study is I have notes here, and so I study each question. So instead of taking notes, I get the question and then I copy and paste the answer. And then if any of you want these files of mine to study from, let me know. So let me see. Yes, and then I highlight, bold, and underline the question, which structure controls the endocrine system. And then I have all this extra information that I need to know, like growth hormone releasing hormone. Okay. The hypothalamus also produces hormones that are stored in the vesicles in the posterior pituitary gland, and they are antidiuretic hormone and oxytocin. Okay, so it produces these two. The pituitary gland is the master gland. So I highlight the things that I want to remember, just so that when I have to reread these notes to remind myself, it's already done for me. As it produces several hormones that regulate the activities of other glands. The thyroid gland produces thyroid hormone. Let me just highlight here. The parathyroid gland produces parathyroid hormone, and it is responsible for calcium homeostasis. All right. Then next. See how answering these questions kind of breaks the reading for me, and I'm like doing stuff with my hands, and that helps me study. So this is my recommended method. Now we have the next question is which of the following is not a function of a hormone? Which of the following is not a function of a hormone? Metabolism, growth and development, energy storage, gas exchange. What could it be? Which of the following is not a function of a hormone? Let's see. It's wrong. Gas exchange. Okay. So the correct answer is gas exchange. So I'm going to copy this and put it in my notes here. I underline in bold. Which of the following is not a function of a hormone? Gas exchange. Gas exchange is by the respiratory system. Hormones are chemical messengers that carry information to cells to help maintain homeostasis. They carry out several functions, including metabolism, growth and development, reproduction, development of sexual characteristics, energy storage, and fluid regulation. All right, next question. Which of the following correctly describes an endocrine hormone? Chemical messengers that act on distant tissues. So what I do is instead of wasting time to see which, I just check the answer. Like, this is cram studying, guys, okay? So this is how I do it. So it saves a little bit of time of reading all the answers that are wrong, and then you're reading all the 3 or 4 of those answers are wrong, and you're reading them, and that might confuse your mind. So for me, I just pick a random answer and I check it, and it's going to tell me whether it's correct or not. So, which of the following correctly describes an endocrine hormone? The correct answer is chemical messengers that act on distant tissues. Which of the following correctly describes an endocrine hormone? All right. So we're going to go here. Ooh, my eyes. Let's see. I need to copy the question. I have the exam in 5 days, guys. So, and I've taken the T's before, and now this is for the HESI. So it's similar, and I did good on the T's studying this way. So let's keep going. Which of the following correctly describes an endocrine hormone? Chemical messengers that act on distant tissues. Endocrine hormones are chemical messengers that act on distant tissues. When chemicals act on nearby cells, it's called paracrine signaling. Okay. Endocrine hormones are chemical messengers that act on distant tissues. Chemical messengers that act on distant tissues. Okay. When chemicals act on nearby cells, it is called paracrine signaling. So I really don't know that, so I underline it. Paracrine signaling. And on autocrine, and an autocrine action, let's highlight that too, is when hormones act on the same glands that secrete them. So that's a really good one to know. Let me underline that. Hormones are chemical messengers and not electrical messengers. Hormones are chemical messengers and not electrical messengers. Okay. Excitable tissues like nervous tissue utilize electrical impulses. All right, next question. Which of the following describes negative feedback control of the endocrine system? Again, just pick a random one. I'm on a roll, guys. All right, I just guessed, but okay. Which of the following describes the negative feedback control of the endocrine system? So I'm gonna paste it here. The production, which of the following describes negative feedback control of the endocrine system? Production of a hormone feeds back to decrease its own production. Production of a hormone feeds back to decrease its own production. I'm going to need to read that one more time. Which of the following describes negative feedback control of the endocrine system? Production of a hormone feeds back to decrease its own production. Okay. Basically, okay. Negative feedback control decreases the production of the hormone. The hypothalamus is primarily controlled by negative feedback mechanism. That's good to know. In a negative feedback, a hormone feeds back to inhibit its own production. Okay, a hormone feeds back to inhibit its own production. Once an adequate amount of the hormone has been produced, it sends back signals to inhibit its production. This is useful since it prevents excess amounts of hormone from being produced. For example, the hypothalamus releases corticotropin releasing hormone, which acts on the anterior pituitary to cause the production of ACTH. ACTH acts on the adrenal cortex to cause the secretion of cortisol. When an adequate quantity of cortisol is produced, it feeds back to shut down further production of CRH by the hypothalamus. This ultimately slows the production of cortisol. In typical functioning of the endocrine system, the tropic hormone acts on the target gland to increase production of its hormone. This is not negative feedback, okay? This ultimately slows the program. In typical functioning of the endocrine system, the tropic hormone increases the production, acts on the target gland to increase production of its hormone. This is not negative feedback, okay? Next question. Which of the following hormones will act on surface membrane receptors? Which of the following hormones will act on surface membrane receptors? Let's just maybe insulin, okay. The answer is insulin. So, which of the following hormones will act on surface membrane receptors? Insulin. Non-steroid hormones. Non-steroid hormones examples are polypeptide hormones and glycopeptides are hydrophilic. Non-steroidal hormones are hydrophilic. They are carried by blood to their target. Hydrophilic. They are carried by blood to their target tissue. As they are lipophobic and are not fat soluble, they do not cross the plasma membrane but bind to receptors on the cell surface. That's good to know. Examples are insulin, thyroid hormone, glucagon. Most hormones are non-steroid hormones. Steroid hormones. These are hydrophobic, so they are carried by protein. They're hydrophobic. So they're carried by protein transporters in the blood. When they get to their target tissue, they are in the blood. Sorry. All right. Let me move this up. When they get to their target tissue, they cross the cell membrane and act on receptors inside the cell. Steroid hormones are produced mainly by gonads, estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, and adrenal glands, cortisol. All right. Which